Hello and welcome to Will's Infinite Library. I am Will and this is my Infinite Library. So today I wanted to talk about my 10 favorite reads of 2024 so far. I'm recording this in early November, so there could be more good books around the corner, but I've read a bunch of books that I want to share with you. I tried to pick a mix of books that are popular and you're excited about, and some new books that you may not have heard of. And I'm going to list a few that I've talked about already on this channel throughout the year, and then go into some more detail about some new books that you haven't heard about yet. So let's get right into it. So the first book that I wanted to talk about is the most recent one that I've read, actually, which is The Mountain in the Sea. This is a really interesting book about octopuses becoming conscious, octopi, I guess, or like reaching a new level of consciousness that makes them more like sentient and more on the level of human intelligence. And octopi are a fascinating creature species in real life. So the book was really interesting. It's kind of reflecting on like the zoology of the octopi and a meditation on consciousness itself. So it's like kind of science and philosophy and psychology and all of these things rolled into one. And that's what makes it so interesting. But it is a bit dry and I didn't love it at first. And I ended up finding myself skimming a lot of parts because there are a lot of characters, a lot of situations introduced and thrown at you, and they're really short snippets, so you don't really have time to get too into them. But the ideas here are what are really interesting. And the part when this all kind of clicked for me was when I read a passage where one of the characters in the book is talking about a review of their book that they received that said something to the effect of like, this book doesn't know whether it wants to be philosophy or science, and instead it achieves neither goal. And I was like, oh, this book is really self-aware, because that's what The Mountain in the Sea is it's trying all of these things, and none of them are quite landing because it's trying to focus on one and the other and then shift back and forth. And it becomes a bit of a kind of hodgepodge of ideas, which are fascinating. I didn't love my time with this book, honestly, but I kept finding myself finding things to take away, which are the kind of books that I actually, I guess, stick with me the most. Not the books that I find most enjoyable, particularly to read, but the ones that challenge me and make me think a little bit differently and kind of live in my mind and make me see things a little differently. So this book did that. So kind of a weird one to start the list off with. But the other thing I wanted to mention is the fictional books within the book. There's a couple of them about consciousness and octopi written by scientists. Every single chapter has a passage between it from one of these books. And I really feel like those are the books that the author wanted to write. This book is kind of advertised as a thriller, but it's really more of a meditation on these ideas. So I think that the author kind of strung them together with fiction to make it more of a publishable book, because the ones that I think he wanted to write are like scientific publications, but like based on kind of conjecture and what ifs and like kind of thought experiments. So that's kind of when I realized like that's what this book is trying to do. That's what it wants to be. It doesn't always hit the mark 10 for 10, but it's trying something interesting and different. And that's why I find it a really interesting book. While we're sticking with books that are defying the conventions of novels, the next book on my list is Trout Fishing in America. This is a novel as well that is not a novel at all. It's kind of a bunch of short snippets. They're like very nonsensical a lot of the time. This book was written, I think, in the 60s, and it's very experimental. And I think that the kind of goal of it was to push the boundaries of what a novel can be and of what can make sense and what can be realism. And there are kind of flickers of it all coming together. So it's called Trout Fishing in America, and Trout Fishing in America becomes like this metaphor that keeps getting recalled. And sometimes it's a character, sometimes it's a place, sometimes it's an action. But trout fishing in America can mean basically anything. But it's kind of this like tongue-in-cheek way of commenting on, I guess, society at large and like what it meant to be an American, specifically in the 60s, I guess, but really anytime. It kind of pokes fun at, I don't know, at it itself, at being kind of a social commentary. It's just bizarre. Like, you have to check it out if you're interested. Some of the sections weren't as interesting, but there are a few that really stood out, and I found really enjoyable. Kind of the more nonsensical ones, because I felt like that's where the book was leaning most into itself. And then another book I read, so this was also Trout Fishing in America, was a book I came to searching for other writers like Tom Robbins, as I often do. And the next book is also one of those, which is Fluke from Christopher Moore. So I read a few Christopher Moore books recently, and they haven't super clicked with me, but Fluke was the closest to actually feeling to me like it was trying to do the same kind of things a lot of Tom Robbins books do, which is kind of having this weird, like, conspiracy theory level strange thing happen that's super fascinating and super interesting. It starts off kind of with oceanographers studying whales, and that part I didn't love, to be honest. It was a lot like The Mountain and the Sea, honestly, where it was like, I feel like the author did so much research and wanted to show their work, so they put in all these facts and details that don't really move the story along, don't really make you connect with the characters anymore, but they're interesting. It did that. And then, like, maybe midway through, it starts to get real weird, and there's like kind of a new life form discovered on Earth, deep in the ocean, kind of like The Mountain and the Sea, though it's not octopi. It's weirder than that, which makes it cooler. And it kind of goes into this weird other world. It's on Earth, but like this place, I don't want to spoil it, but like this place that you didn't think could exist, that exists, and it becomes really fantastical and weird and lovely. And I really loved that imaginative aspect of it. And that's why this book really stood out to me. And then again, like a weird connection between that book and the next one. The next book I read was The Life Impossible. It is also about like weird mystical things happening in the ocean. It is about an old woman who, it constantly talks about how old she is, which gets a bit old itself. See what I did there? She's telling her crazy experiences with the own kind of conspiracy theory level aspect of this novel, which is her strange experiences in the ocean with a mystical force. Here we go again. And she's telling them to her former student. She's retired. She's dealt with a lot of death in her family and is on her own now. And she inherits a house in Ibiza from a former like acquaintance, really, who she had like one night of connection with, and then ended up inheriting their house. So it's like this bizarre setup, and she goes there, things only get weirder, and it's written in an epistolary format to the student, the former student. And I don't know why it's in that format, other than I feel like it was just kind of a way to structure it, but it didn't super work for me. It wasn't bad, but I just kind of wished it was a straight up telling to the reader from the narrator. I enjoyed a lot of pieces of it, but there were a lot of pieces that I didn't love as much, like these kind of philosophical moments reflecting on things that felt really like, yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone thought that when they were like 12 kind of thing. Like, there was a moment when the main character's musing over like, what makes one plant a weed and another a desirable plant, and just those kind of things that are presented as like deeply profound, but you're like, okay. Yeah, it was interesting, and again, not my favorite book ever, but it made me think a lot, and it's a book that will live in my mind for a while as well, and really kind of stuck with the theme of the other ones of mystical experiences and strange things happening in the ocean. So then the next book is more of a straight up urban fantasy novel, which is Rogue Community College. So this book is about a trained assassin infiltrating a magic school to assassinate the school itself. This is a tie-in to the Adam Binder series, like kind of a spin-off of that, but focused on the school. So it's very much like a magic school story. It has a lot of cool twists and turns, dealing with kind of like identity and being undercover as this not spy, what am I trying to say? Assassin, on a secret mission. But it does some cool things to subvert that and have some twists. happen as their identity becomes revealed later on in a way that you wouldn't really expect and in a way that is fresh and interesting. There are a lot of dark themes in this book because Assassin, but overall it gave me kind of cozy magic school vibes that reminded me more than anything of The House in the Cerulean Sea. So if you like these kind of found family fantasy stories, I highly recommend it. It was a very fun read and a first book in a series, so even if you haven't read the Adam Binder series, it's perfectly fine to jump straight into this one. And then speaking of The House in the Cerulean Sea, the last is Somewhere Beyond the Sea, the sequel to The House in the Cerulean Sea. So this book, it was really fun to revisit the characters from that book, all of the kids, and it gets very political. And the structure is it was not what I expected, I'll say. Like, it starts with this big trial that's basically like trying to take away the rights of magical people. And then from there, it sets in motion the story to kind of be like the structure of The House in the Cerulean Sea, where someone's coming to the school to kind of do an audit of the school with with bad intentions to really like find an excuse to shut it down. I don't know, it just didn't go quite in the direction I thought it would. I wanted it to spend more time, I guess, moving things forward, but it really felt like it was kind of retelling that story in a lot of ways, where at the beginning it seemed like it was going to be about the kids learning to live in the wider world and not be kind of ostracized into hiding on the island. But it kind of keeps them there in a way that I found disappointing, I guess, because I just wanted them to succeed and thrive and, change the world. Who doesn't want that? But it was really fun overall. I have to say, I enjoyed it. So I would recommend. The books that I've already talked about this year in other videos that I want to add to this top 10 list are as follows. Pet, which was a really fun kind of young adult book about a kid who hunts monsters, and it's very allegorical in kind of a classic, like really well done, beautifully written way that brings to mind something like Madeleine L'Engle's books. So if you like those kind of things, I would highly recommend Pet. And then Cloud Atlas was another one that I read early in the year, first thing this year, which is a book I wanted to read for a long time. It's just a fascinating book with a fascinating structure of so many different characters written in so many different styles. You're inevitably going to enjoy some and dislike some because they're so different, but that is the book's strength and what makes it so cool. And then the last book that I wanted to mention on my top 10 is a book of poetry to mix things up a little bit, which is Time is a Mother, which was just really beautiful, and I needed some poetry in my life. Again, I read this really early in the year, and it was exactly what I needed to read at the time. So if you're looking for something a little different, if you're looking for poetry, I highly recommend that one. So those are my top 10 books that I've read so far in 2024. We'll see if I have any additions to this in the coming months, but either way, I think these are 10 great books that I'd love to hear your thoughts on if you've read any of them or what your top 10 books are from 2024. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. It means a lot to me to know that you like the content that I'm producing and would like to see more. Let me know specifically what you'd like to see more of as well in the comments below. And with that, I'll let you get back to your reading. See you next time.